Johnson, retired Major, United States Army, Director of the VFW, Post 5206. Did I get that number right?
5206, I'm the commander.
Commander. Okay. We had the pleasure of speaking a couple months ago. Actually, it was one of my first episodes. And to this day is the most listened to episode.
Well, that's great.
Of all 13 that have hit the streets. So
wow.
People are obviously very interested in your story, and the story also of Private Luther Rhodes, who was from this area, who gallantly fought in World War II. And up until recently, his family, who still live in Edneyville to this day, had no idea of his fate.
Right.
And you were instrumental in discovering what happened to Private Rhodes. I understand that there have been some developments in the story, and that's why I wanted you back on the podcast to talk about the developments in the Luther Rhodes story. So if you could fill in our listeners on these developments, that'd be awesome. So thank you for coming on the show, Bob. What's happened in the couple months since we last spoke?
Well, the biggest thing is that the Defense POW MIA accounting agency, which is a federal government part of the Pentagon organization, came last week on the 15th to brief the family, the Rhodes family, about the identification of Luther's remains and also to schedule an internment, which tentatively is scheduled for the 4th of April. Not totally confirmed, but that's what they asked for. But basically, the government came, told the family what exactly had happened to him, the condition of his remains, and then there to schedule and what would be involved in him being laid to rest after 83 years in the Rhodes family cemetery in Edneyville.
Okay. Could you give us a little refresher on the impetus for this and the backstory of Luther Rhodes? He was a young man from Edneyville, North Carolina, just to the northeast of Hendersonville, and went off to World War II. And he was a Marine Corps private, Semper Fi. Could you give us just a little bit of the backstory about Luther Rhodes, his beginnings?
Well, specifically Luther, he joined the Marine Corps a month before Pearl Harbor at the age of 17, and then trained at what is now called Camp Lejeune. And in August of 1942, in America's first land battle of World War II, was part of the invasion of Guadalcanal in August, and he fought until October when he was killed. And what had happened is they had lost accountability of his remains, and they just determined that they found him, essentially. The way this started, as you might know, the VFW has a thing called Wall of Honor, in which we take service members from Henderson County and put their awards and decorations in 8 by 10 inch shadow boxes and put them on the wall in the Veterans Center on 900 North Main Street.
And you encourage all veterans, correct?
Yeah, it's not just veterans of foreign wars, but all veterans of service. And right now we have 59 folks on the wall. It continues to grow. But what has happened is, and somebody had asked us, a guy came to one of our briefings. We do briefings around the county, letting people know about the wall. And he asked about a soldier from Hendersonville who was missing in action. And a member of our group recently joined, told me that he does research for missing in action. He's a Navy guy, so mostly Navy, Marine, but he can do anybody. And because of that, we started looking for the guy that he'd asked for, and then we this past May, we decided to have a ceremony in which we would honor all of the missing in action service members from Henderson County, and build shadow boxes and have a formal ceremony that included the playing of taps and a rifle salute. And in that process, we found Luther Rhodes among the 13 who were missing from Henderson County.
And how many were missing from the World War II era?
Right now, there's 72,000 MIAs from World War II. The total is 80,000, counting the war since then, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. There are none missing from the recent global war on terrorism. Nobody's missing. And also, there are no POWs. So it's a pretty select group, but World War II is 72,000 is the largest number.
And do you think that's the nature of records weren't as well kept back then, or?
No, it was really just a bigger war. Yeah. And you're right about records, but it was a world war, so all over the world. A lot who were missing are in the Pacific because they went down in the jungles, and a lot of the folks went down on ships. Or on planes that crashed into the ocean.
Yeah, I was in the scuba diving industry for a couple decades, and I traveled to Peleliu, the island of Peleliu, in the nation of Palau, a few years back, and walked through some of the caves. And to this day, there are skulls of dead warriors in the caves, and it's shocking to me that in this day and age, there's still remnants of battle, and it just. To me, it speaks of how there's still so little that we know about how, the fate of a lot of soldiers turned out during the war. So you did the due diligence on Luther Rhodes, and there was a connection to Hawaii of some sort, as I recall.
Right. We weren't sure. I did an awful lot of research. Several books written actually mentioned him. And he was what happened at the cemetery at Guadalcanal a couple of years after the war. They moved everybody out of it. And most went to Hawaii, the Punch Bowl, and some went to the Philippines from what we learned in our research. And we discovered when the organization came last week that he had been in Hawaii the whole time, listed as an unknown. And what had happened, and the most amazing thing, is that Luther's brother, Marvin, is still alive, very, very rare, and the organization said it was rare as well, to have a living next of kin, a living sibling. And they had gotten the DNA from Marvin to try to find that they were finding remains and thought it might be Luther, and they kept checking it against it, and it didn't pan out, but they still had it. And because of our event in May of 2025, we decided after that why don't we see if we can't find next of kin of the 13 that are missing. Starting with Luther, I know Luther's family from living here for 40 years, and started with him and got up with Senator Ted Budd's liaison here and put together a packet and some research. I felt it might help the cause if we could do research on each of the MIAs. And in about July, we gave it to them, and 3 weeks later, he was identified.
Wow. And how old is Marvin today?
He's 82, or he's 83.
Okay, so he was a younger brother, I assume.
Yeah, I think when Luther left for boot camp, he was his mom, their mom, was still pregnant with Marvin.
Wow. And what did their family think this whole time, in the time of mystery, when it was quite uncertain what had happened to Luther?
Well, they pretty much had given up and realized that all the other siblings and certainly the parents had passed, not knowing what had happened to Luther. And there's only one his brother is the only one of that generation. Now, certainly people grew up knowing about Luther, the story of Luther, and the Battle of Guadalcanal and World War II.
Was he an infantryman?
Well, the Marines are all infantry, and,
Sure.
and he had that function. He was in a rifle company, Lima Company, I think the 3rd Marines. When we put this together for Luther, we did not give up on looking for others. So now we're actually working on 4 others. We had 13, we found Luther, now there's 12, and then we've done extensive research on the 12, and 8 of them unfortunately went down in the water, either in ships that were sunk or in planes that were shot down, and we feel there's no chance of getting them, but we found 4 that were lost on land, and the remains might be found, might be somewhere, or maybe the crash sites hadn't been found, but One was in Burma, one was two were in Italy, and one was captured in the Philippines and actually survived the Bataan Death March.
Oh, wow.
There were two there. We thought we could maybe find two because a lot of research, they recovered a lot of unknowns and they have them somewhere. And our thought is if we had DNA like we did with Luther, we could find these others. Recent research, we discovered one of the two in the Philippines. We have records showing that he had been lost at sea. What had happened in the Philippines is the Japanese saw POWs as slave labor, and they moved an awful lot of them by ship to Japan to be slave laborers. And what happened is by that time we were getting naval dominance, and a lot of our submarines were sinking, unfortunately sinking ships with American and Allied POWs in them. And we have some accounts that one of the two POWs from the Philippines was lost in a sinking, and we're not looking for him because generally you're not going to find the ones that were lost at sea, and he was one of the two. But another one, we looking for next of kin, and like with Luther, we think we have a chance of finding these four.
Yeah. Can you reveal the identity of these folks in the off chance that someone might be listening that knows something?
Yes. And we've done an awful lot of genealogy research. So the ones that we think there's a decent chance, Charles Richard Hedge, who actually lived right down the street from me in downtown Hendersonville, and he was lost in June of 1942. The second one is Barack McCall. He was the one who was a POW in the Philippines. The third one is Charles Ray Smith, who was lost in a plane crash in Italy, and Alvin Sevier McCarson, who was lost in a plane crash in Italy. So we've seen with Hedge, we found records that we think the plane had been discovered by the Japanese. There's records of that. But again, we don't know. The others, we have records on McCall, on Smith and McCarson, not as much, but they all have relatives that lived in Henderson County or nearby. So we're continuing to look for next of kin, and if we can find next of kin, we can work with the Defense POW MIA accounting agency and get DNA to them. Interesting, I did a talk at the library about this subject in November, and one of the audience members was related to another person who was lost in a catastrophic sinking, but she wanted to go ahead and give DNA to the government organization, and we did that. So the helpfulness to us was that now we know exactly how to do it. It was helpful for them in our continued research. We found a photograph that their family didn't have. So it's not, while we're probably not going to find him, now we know exactly how to help people get their DNA to help identify their lost ones. And we find a lot of information that we would not have found if we hadn't been looking.
Yeah. Is there reluctance on the part of any of these families to come forward, do you think? They just want to let history remain
No.
mystery?
When the folks from the government came last week, I talked to them about that, and they said that in some cases there is reluctance because they would contact somebody and ask for DNA, and people thought it was a scam or didn't trust it.
Yeah.
In our case, it's going to be local people going finding folks, so they'll already be the trust, and then we'll be able to get the information and the DNA to the right place, and hopefully locate the four that we think there's some chance of finding.
If anybody knows anything about these families, how do they contact you, Bob?
They should get a hold of us at the VFW. I was going to give you some names of relatives. Unfortunately, I think everybody on our list is, in fact, we have enough records to know when they passed, but certainly they have children and aunts and uncles.
Sure.
And the person we did find for Roy Williams, who was lost at sea, The sister of him is still alive, and she's the niece. So and they live in Hendersonville. That's a very close connection.
Okay.
But Charles Hedge, his parents were Oral Everett Hedge and Ruth Harriet Smith. For Brownslow McCall, parents were Meredith Eli McCall and Essie Walker, and they has a half brother named Raymond Ford, and a half sister Polly Essie Ford. For Charles Smith, the parents were William Thomas Smith and Rachel Inez McCall. And then we have siblings, a brother, Gerard Lanier, a brother, Emil Edward, a sister, June Smith, a sister, Irma Inez, another sister, Ruby Carolee, and an additional brother, Thomas William, who's called Tommy. For Alvin Sevier McCarson, the parents are Milton Sevier McCarson and Laura Emma Jane Korn. And as you know, Korn's a pretty common name here in the mountains. Mm-hmm. Had a sister, Laura Christine McCarson, a brother, Raymond Henry, and a sister, Mildred Catherine. So the ones I listed are all gone, but they've got to have children, just like Marvin's 83 years old. Their children would probably be in their 60s, children's nephews, aunts, but we could use the public's help to try to find somebody related to them and put together an arrangement with the organization that can help find these missing in action service members.
Crazy question. Can you look into like Ancestry.com records and find connections? Is that even a possibility? Or
no, that's where we got this information.
Okay.
Certainly that's a very robust system, and we just need the public help to try to find these other people, and we can confirm the connection. But people do move away. But in the case of Roy Williams, the sister and the niece still live here. So we're thinking of the other four that there's got to be nearby relatives, and again we're talking probably people in their 50s, 60s, or maybe down another generation. Every generation is about 20 years. But somewhere within there, we could find a relative and then find their DNA. And again, we've discovered in our research that there's an awful lot of unknowns all through the world in cemeteries. And we know the organization. It's interesting that Luther was very well known within that in the government, and they were just thrilled to find him because they had been looking for him and knowing the thing with Luther, people have written books about him, and the picture of him was very endearing. So he actually was kind of he was well known within the Defense POW MIA accounting agency.
Well, it's a big world, but it's becoming increasingly connected with websites and social media and so forth. So if anybody knows anything about these folks, reach out to Bob Johnson at the BFW Post 5206 in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And it's admirable work that you're doing, Bob, and really appreciated. Tell us a little bit more about the ceremony that's taking place on April 4th.
Well, have a tentative burial date for Luther. The way it works, his remains are in Hawaii. It's interesting, when they came on Tuesday, I was able, on the 15th of January, I was able to go to that meeting, and they had the remains and the skeleton, which was pretty intact. They didn't expect that after 83 years,
right,
or knowing that he was killed in battle, but they actually had a photograph of the skeleton. And they measured, obviously DNA, but they measured the length of bones and everything. They wanted to be absolutely sure it was the right person. So the way it works is once they settle on the exact date, the Marine Corps, because Luther was a Marine, will assign folks to escort the remains from Hawaii to the local area. We think it's going to be Asheville Airport. It might be Greenville or Charlotte. But they'll escort him here, and eventually, a couple of days later, they will have a ceremony. The Rhodes have a private cemetery. In fact, there's a memorial at the Rhodes cemetery to Luther, but they'll have the ceremony there with a full contingent of Marines. And we believe it'll be a pretty significant event and be in the news and a remarkable story to find somebody after 83 years.
Is the public invited to this, or is it invite only, or how does that work?
I haven't heard. The Rhodes are pretty welcoming. When we met last week with the DPAA's organization, there was about 40 people there, and the news was invited, and certainly the family members. I'm thinking they would not mind, but I can't speak for them.
Right. Is it possible, due to the age of the remains, was there any sort of autopsy done on how Luther died, or is that just impossible?
No. That there was in the books about him. There was and in the official record it said he was shot in the head, and a couple of bones are missing around his feet, so they thought he might have been hit by some artillery fire. But again, remarkable amount of remains left, and as you can imagine, Guadalcanal was a pretty brutal battle, and this was almost 2 months in.
Yeah.
And Luther had there for the invasion, and then fought many battles before the one that took his life.
Is there going to be any effort for some sort of memorial or any sort of public presence honoring the MIAs from the Henderson County area?
We had the one last May. I'm not anticipating any, but if we're able to, through the help of the community and getting DNA and the government, we will have some events too. Right now, nothing specifically planned.
Okay, it's an incredible story, and it has roots right here in Henderson County. And again, you're doing amazing work trying to bring closure to these families that have lost loved ones in these foreign battles.
We shouldn't forget that these folks did not come home. In the ceremony we did in May, I participated in where we actually brought remains back with family members in full remains. And there's a ceremony that doesn't happen with missing in action. There's nothing. They die. There's question. Years go by, but there is no closure, no official manner of commemorating them. So it just, I imagine for the families, it's just a big hole that and unfortunately in Luther's case, with the exception of Marvin, his brother, they died knowing nothing about what happened to Luther, and that's just a shame, and we'd like to try to help solve some of these problems.
I would like to. I would love the privilege of getting to that ceremony on April 4th, if you think that's a possibility.
I'll talk to Marvin. He's pretty open. He's working with the Lightning and on two of the stories so far, and they've been very helpful, and I think they've got a connection with them.
Yeah, I had the honor to go on the Blue Ridge Honor Flight this past September, and to see the public come out and show their support for the returning veterans was incredible. And you could, you could feel the long overdue honor that these folks had upon returning that they didn't get when they returned home from the war. So, hopefully people will show up, if that's a possibility, and honor this young man that gave his life for our country in the South Pacific.
Yeah, there's supposed to be an airport reception too, so I'm pretty sure the community can be invited to the airport where they actually bring and he'll be brought back in a casket, a flag draped casket. So that's a part of it, and I'm pretty sure the public can come to that, and it would be up to the Rhodes family whether to come to the funeral or not. I wouldn't be surprised that people would go anyway, but there will be, I believe, a lot more news on this as we get closer to the date.
Yeah. And if people want to follow this story, do you have information on your website about it or social media?
We do put it on our website, but also the Lightning has done 2 stories on it. And
okay.
In fact, I saw it online. Today's Thursday, so the print edition of the Lightning would have a story about that. If you see that magazine, or that newspaper, go buy yourself a copy, and you'll learn a little bit more about Luther. And I also don't want you to forget about the other 4 that we're looking for too, because we feel finding Luther was an absolute miracle, but because we experienced one, we now believe in miracles.
Yeah, absolutely. Miracles do happen. Well, thank you, Bob. Is there anything else going on with VFW Post 5206 or anything else in your life that you want to talk about?
I don't want to steal the thunder from this event. I do have a lot going on, but we can talk about that later.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Bob Johnson. I appreciate you coming back on the show again. The episode that we did, I think that was episode number 3, was our most listened to episode, and hopefully people will come back and get an update on the Luther Rhodes story. And best of luck to you heading into April 4th in the ceremony.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate you bringing me back on.
Thank you, Bob.
The Kudzu Project is made possible by the Lucy Agency, helping businesses across the South grow deep roots and stand out. Based in Hendersonville, North Carolina, this full-service marketing firm builds handcrafted websites, eye-catching logos, and social media that pops for businesses and organizations. Because if your story's worth telling, it's worth telling right. Learn more at lucyagency.com. That's LUCEY agency.com.
Everyone has a story. And at the Kudzu Project, we want to hear yours. Go to kudzuproject.com and fill out our story submission form. You can write your story for us to read on the podcast, request to be interviewed, or even nominate someone else whose story deserves to be told. The Kudzu Project is all about capturing the voices and spirit of our community, and your story could be the next one we share. Visit kudzuproject.com and tell your story today.